This is your reality check.
Hi everyone, and welcome to The Reality Check, the weekly Canadian show that explores a wide range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. This is the show for January 16th, 2018, and I'm your host, Darren McKee. With me, as usual, are Adam Gardner.
What's up, cuboids?
Christina Roach.
Hey, checkers.
And producer Pat.
Hi, everyone.
We have three great segments for you tonight. Christina is going to explore the latest health fad that's raising eyebrows, and then I'm going to cover whether bears actually hibernate. But first, we're going to look at some mail and do some internal housekeeping. Adam, take us away.
A few shows ago, I talked about the aluminum Christmas trees as they were shown in A Charlie Brown Christmas and discussed whether or not the cartoon special can be blamed for their demise. I didn't have any definitive conclusion about the role the show may have had in aluminum Christmas trees going out of favor, though I did suggest that those who said it was primarily responsible were likely misguided. I got a bit of feedback from listeners about this segment, which I wanted to read on the show. First, we got a comment from Dean Maservi, who said the following. Reply, aluminum Christmas trees. Born in the 1950s, I'm old enough to vividly remember both aluminum trees and the first Charlie Brown Christmas broadcast, as well as its aftermath. While the anti-aluminum revolution is too heavy to lay on the shoulders of a single cartoon, I can tell you at least anecdotally that the Charlie Brown effect was real. The aluminum trees were a hit with some adults, especially moms. No mess, no tree shopping every year, artsy, available in pink, but kids universally hated them. So fake, so ugly, so unfragrant, so anti-Christmas, so grown-up. And by kids, I mean us baby boomers, a mega demographic that has been catered to all our lives. A Charlie Brown Christmas was, consciously I am sure, tapping into two veins, the antipathy towards Christmas milking and the growing environmental movement, in which aluminum specifically was a prime villain. In the 1960s, median strips and roadsides were garbage pits overflowing with candy wrappers and rusting beer cans. While it cannot be held solely responsible, and the plural of anecdote is not data, Charlie Brown's contribution to the demise of aluminum trees was, from my vantage point, reasonably significant. It was, if not the first, certainly the most prominent and widely quoted pop culture phenomenon to openly demonize the metal trees. And it targeted the middle end of the very demographic that was most listened and catered to, at a time when the grown-ups were starting to reconsider the aluminum wasteland they had been creating. Thanks for a great podcast, as always.
What a profound message.
Oh yeah, it was great. And next I got a similar message from Karen Barry, and it reads, I'd like to weigh in on the aluminum Christmas tree discussion. I was also born in the 50s and remember our own silver tree, which we had for at least a couple of years. I don't think Charlie Brown killed it, but the cartoon doubtless reflected the popular opinion that Christmas meant tradition. The aluminum trees were a product of the Populux design period. Think big TVs and hi-fis on spiny legs, cars with fins, the Jetsons, and anything that looked space-aged back then. It was a novelty, and as a novelty, it had a limited lifespan and eventually went the way of such things as grandmothers who covered their sofas in fitted couch covers made of plastic. You had to peel yourself off of them when wearing shorts.
Delightful.
Aw, she hasn't met my Portuguese aunts.
So I think Charlie Brown or no Charlie Brown, those trees were on borrowed time. Most people prize tradition in their holidays, so this novelty just couldn't last. But I sure wish I had that tree now. It brings back memories. These messages are both somewhat similar. These are listeners who feel that Charlie Brown really keyed into an existing feeling amongst viewers, which ultimately led to these trees going out of fashion. Again, hard to tell exactly what impact might be, but it's really good to get a perspective of people who lived through these years and recall the reaction firsthand. A lot of the pieces I read on the issue were like mine, written by younger people who weren't around for the fad and only had maybe a memory of some relative who might have had one. And I also like Karen's comment about how she wished that she had the tree now. Now, it shows this complex nature of nostalgia, which can have us wanting classic-looking trees, and then later there actually being a desire to go back to what was once considered modern. So, aesthetics can be very complicated. So a big thanks to Dean and Karen. We always love getting feedback, and these particular pieces really help bring us a real sense of what was going on at the time and what kinds of individual attitudes were amongst those that led people to move on from these kinds of trees.
Thanks, Adam. Were there any other housekeeping items?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on something briefly regarding changes to the show over the last while. Discussing money in TRC is not something we've done very much over the last 9 years, but I wanted to talk a little bit about advertising in the show. If you listen regularly, you know we have been experimenting with including a couple of advertisers over the last year and a bit, basically since we joined the Entertainment One podcast network. We started with running pre-roll ads. Those are ads that appear before the show starts. And that was something like, this episode of The Reality Check is brought to you by X. As you might expect, because of the nature of the show, we've been really choosy about the ads we run, and we thought that that went fairly well. Then recently, we were given an opportunity to also include mid-roll ads. These are ads that appear in the middle of the show, and we, TRC crew, were a little hesitant about these, but decided to give it a go on a trial basis. We got some feedback from you on these, and to be honest, I think everyone feels it's a bit awkward to break up the show with advertising. So what we've decided to do is include up to 2 ads at the beginning of the show, but we're going to opt out of putting ads in the middle of the show for now. Also, because we're part of a podcast network, they will occasionally include promos for other podcasts on the network at the end of the show. I guess at this point, I want to mention that TRC isn't and never has been a money-making endeavor. The show has pretty much always operated at a loss, and when some funds have come in, we've spent it on things like upgrading recording gear. I'm an avid listener to podcasts, and it's pretty much typical for shows to now include some kind of advertising. So I guess what I'm saying is we'd be happy to hear from you. What do you think about us putting ads in the show? Also, seeing as we're opting out of some money here, it's a good time to remind listeners that they can support the show. Taking a page from Sam Harris's podcast, I'll say that if donating to the show is not as financially trivial as buying a cup or two of coffee, we don't want your money. Donating to TRC should in no way cause you hardship, and we're still happy to have you as a listener. That said, if you can, we'd welcome your donation. There's a donate via PayPal button on our website, trcpodcast.com. Putting on the show is no small effort, and there are costs involved. We continue to do it because we think many of the things we talk about are important. This is also a really good time for us to thank those of you who have donated in the past and those who continue to support us. You really do help us make the show. Lastly, you can support the show in other ways. You can leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform, and you can tell a friend about the show. Anyone have anything to add to that?
No, I think you pretty much cover it. I mean, the show is a labor of love, and we just do it to get the word out there. And if you want to support us, that's up to you, but just don't feel pressured to do it.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you said, Pat. Again, it shouldn't cause any hardship. It'd be nice if we didn't always run at a loss. We thought we'd try some ads. We also thought the mid-roll seems a bit awkward. Didn't want to ruin the flow of the show. And we're just happy to have people support us in any way they can.
Well, speak for yourself, guys. I'm in it for the money. Which begs the question, why are you still around?
I don't know if the listeners fully realize that collectively it's probably 20 to 40 hours of work to give you 29 minutes. And so concludes our little housekeeping, which you probably won't hear anything about this for many, many months to come. And now back to the show. Christina, what's the latest health fad that's going to have me raise and or turn my eyebrows?
Well, you may think you've heard it all by now, Darren, when it comes to the snake oil / wellness industry. I thought I'd pretty much seen it all until Pat recently sent us a link to an article about a new wellness fad making the rounds. If you guys can just bear with me for a sec, I just want to make sure I'm pronouncing this right. Raw water.
Sounds right.
It literally could have been an article from The Onion.
Oh, yeah.
But okay, so soon after Pat shared that article, I saw that Tim Caulfield tweeted it as well. Many of you guys have heard me talk about Caulfield in the past. He's a Canada Research Chair in Health Law and Policy, Professor of Law at the University of Alberta, regular Goop debunker, and host of the Vision TV doc-series A User's Guide to Cheating Death. Now, this New York Times article that he tweeted is titled Unfiltered Fervor, The Rush to Get Off the Water Grid by Nellie Bowles. This is what Caulfield tweeted about the piece. This is deeply ridiculous and possibly harmful. Great example of our embrace of the naturalistic fallacy and inability to understand risk. Nicely put, Tim. He went on to write his own piece about the raw water trend that was posted via NBC News a couple of days ago, which I'll reference as well and include in the show notes. So, surprise, the fad is being fueled by Silicon Valley tech insiders who, as we know, have a rep for chasing the holy grail of wellness. Their thirst for raw water is driving the demand for unfiltered, untreated, unsterilized spring water. Their thought process? Drink raw water to prevent the spread of bacteria or other contaminants.
What?
Let me just say that again. They are drinking untreated water with the belief that it will help stop the spread of bacteria and contaminants. I will pause while you guys take a moment to facepalm. Now, according to the New York Times article that opened the Pandora's box on this, proponents of the movement share some traits. They are highly suspicious of tap water, specifically lead pipes and fluoride. They argue beneficial materials can potentially be stripped when water passes through the wrong type of filtration system. Even bottled spring water is taboo, and not because it comes in a plastic bottle. Raw water fans say it's treated with UV light or ozone gas to remove algae, which in turn, they claim, kills the healthful bacteria in water. Let's check with the experts, shall we? Food safety expert Bill Marler was interviewed on the topic for Business Insider, and he says, quote, "Almost everything conceivable that can make you sick can be found in water." He reminds us that the diseases that killed our great-grandparents are completely forgotten about thanks to modern-day public drinking water practices. Even the cleanest, unfiltered, untreated water can contain animal feces, which spreads a disease called giardia with symptoms including vomiting and diarrhea. Then there's the risk of contracting hepatitis A. According to the World Health Organization, contaminated water can transmit diseases such as cholera, dysentery, diarrhea, typhoid, and polio, with contaminated drinking water estimated to cause 502,000 diarrheal deaths each year.
Wow.
Yeah, but aside from that, what? Really?
Yeah, right. Now, to be fair, we know that the U.S. water system isn't perfect, as evinced by the heartbreaking situation in Flint, Michigan. But as Caulfield points out in his article, these events are rare. He adds, quote, "Water disinfection has been credited with the drastic reduction in many infectious diseases, resulting in the saving of literally millions of lives." In a Times Magazine article titled "Raw Water is a New Health Trend, but Is It Safe?", Kellogg Schwab, a professor of water and public health at Johns Hopkins University's Bloomberg School of Public Health, says that the incidence of waterborne illnesses such as cholera and typhoid fever plummeted to almost zero after the U.S. introduced filtration, chlorination, and sanitation practices for public drinking water.
Can I just go on record as saying Kellogg Schwab is a pretty good name?
Yeah, that's a solid name.
Yeah.
In the same piece, Vince Hill, the chief of the CDC's Waterborne Disease Prevention Branch, says that tap water is treated to remove 91 contaminants. But there's a lack of data for what lurks in raw water. In Canada, our drinking water guidelines, quote, "set out the basic parameters that every water system should strive to achieve in order to provide the cleanest, safest, and most reliable drinking water possible." That's according to Health Canada's site. They go on to say water picks up bits and pieces of everything it comes into contact with, including minerals, silt, vegetation, fertilizers, and agricultural runoff. Now, while most of these substances are harmless, some may pose a health risk.
Right. But it also should be pointed out that in Canada, we've not done a great job in the north.
Mm-hmm.
So is anyone really buying this stuff? Well, enough people that in San Francisco, raw water is selling for up to $60 for 2.5 gallons or 9.4 liters. Also, enough people that startups are popping up to deliver untreated water on demand. A company called Zero Mass Water in Arizona installs systems so people can collect water directly from the atmosphere around their homes. A Silicon Valley entrepreneur named Doug Evans, who co-founded a startup called Juicero, is collecting gallons of untreated water to sell at the Burning Man Festival. Oh.
That seems like a wise market for that product.
Yeah. Now, when I read about the following, I could just picture all three of you, how you would react in my head. There is a water store in San Diego called Liquid Eden that even offers you various options of raw water, including fluoride-free, chlorine-free, and a, quote, mineral electrolyte alkaline, unquote, drinking water. The owner of the shop claims they sell 900 gallons of water a day.
Oh my.
citing the reason for her sales have doubled every year is because of the growing water consciousness movement. I needed to pause before I said that one.
Is that consciousness about the quality of water or belief that water is conscious?
Oh, nice.
Right.
Nice. Yeah. I don't want to filter water because it's abuse.
Then there's a company called Live Water, whose small operation has blown up over the last 3 years. Founder Mukund Singh, who changed his name from Christopher Sanborn, has some interesting points of view. He believes raw water has healthy probiotic qualities. There's no evidence to support this claim, in case you were wondering. And he straight up believes public water is poisoned. Says Singh, quote, "Tap water? You're drinking toilet water with birth control drugs in them. Chloramine. And on top of that, they're putting in fluoride. Call me a conspiracy theorist, but it's a mind control drug that has no benefit to our dental health." You're a conspiracy theorist.
He is absolutely a conspiracy theorist. I totally agree. Wow.
To be clear, there is absolutely no evidence supporting fluoride can be used as a mind control drug. But there is actually a bunch of evidence that fluoride is good for dental health. Now, Dr. Donald Hensrud at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota finds this type of rhetoric from raw water proponents dangerous. He says, quote, "Without water treatment, there's acute and then chronic risks. There's evidence all over the world of this, and the reason we don't have those conditions is because of our very efficient water treatment." Now, if you guys aren't irritated enough yet, the New York Times reported that a co-op in San Fran called Rainbow Grocery was selling a 2.5-gallon jug of live water for $37. A Gizmodo article's title doesn't mince any words when reporting this. Raw water is water for rich idiots. To your point, Darren.
No kidding.
More money than sense.
The average monthly wage in Cuba is $19.
Monthly.
Monthly. Yeah.
That's, talk about, puts it in perspective.
They should sell their water.
Apparently.
Now, Caulfield has a great word he uses to describe the use of the naturalistic fallacy and misrepresentation of real science, or science-y sounding words, to market unproven health products. Science-ploitation. As he points out, using the word natural is indeed an effective marketing ploy that has helped sell about $40 billion worth of food products each year in the U.S. alone, and now many, many, many gallons of water. As food safety expert Bill Marler says, it's fine till some 10-year-old girl dies a horrible death from cholera in Montecito, California.
Yeah.
You can't stop consenting adults from being stupid, but we should at least try.
There you go. And also I hate when people play that "you're gonna die" card. I feel it's a cheap shot in arguments. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's a series of exasperations, of course, on our end, because it seems absolutely absurd, but trying to be somewhat, sympathetic, empathetic, that someone believes, like, some sort of, again, naturalistic fallacy, there's a purity to something.
Yeah.
There are chemicals, quote-unquote, in the water. Most of them we think are fine. Maybe someone could say, well, there is some hormones in the water, and 50 years later we'll learn about some minor negative effects we're not aware of now, but it seems a really large amount of money to get this type of thing for an outcome that is very, very unlikely to be that much different than what they're already having.
And history does dictate that water is one of the best ways to get yourself sick when it's untreated.
I'd like to see, sort of as this develops, if it really catches on, if we do see that a lot of people really are getting sick, or, are a lot of people just putting tap water in a jug and selling it for $60, or is, because there's a lot of sources that won't have these problems. If you just pull out well water, it's going to be pretty clean of a lot of those problems, but I guess it depends where it comes from. If it comes from a lake or if it comes from a stream in the mountains, it could be pretty terrible.
Psychologically, it's also quite interesting because people often have bottled water because they don't trust tap water.
Yeah.
And this is saying, like, no. The filtration that tap water uses, that's wrong. They shouldn't be filtering it at all. So there's a certain segment that doesn't think tap water is clean enough because of its process, or maybe they don't understand it. And someone else think, we just need no process at all.
Well, it's not just the filtration, because otherwise you literally would be drinking toilet water.
Yes.
And
Well, maybe sewage, because at the
Yeah.
moment we are drinking toilet water, but toilet water is really clean, so it's not actually a problem.
Sorry, the water that gets flushed down.
That's what you want to say. Yes.
That's what I mean.
Not the
the water,
current water that's in your toilet.
I could drink it right out of the back of the toilet. It'd be
Yeah.
perfectly fine. It's just we find it revolting somehow.
For some reason.
So Christina made me watch a video from this the main guy behind this
The
idea.
sing guy.
and quite honestly, the video ends with him in the middle of a forest drinking water from a small waterfall.
Of course it is.
Wow. Okay.
So the point is that he's not talking about tap water. He believes this stuff.
Yeah.
At least he does for the video.
It was fun watching it
for
with
the
Pat because he was getting increasingly angry.
Well, it's just a face comedy, right?
Yeah,
It's so science-y.
exactly.
Speaking of the woods and parks and outside in nature, do bears hibernate? Well, it is winter. When I was thinking of possible topics to cover, I realized we've never done one on whether bears hibernate. And then Adam pointed out he did it on episode 230.
It was a long time ago.
I guess I should listen to this show more. Or that it's hard to remember things from 5 years ago. Hashtag sad brains. Perhaps next week I'll cover whether bears shit in the woods. But for now, hibernation. Do bears do this? Well, first, what is hibernation? Good old Wikipedia says hibernation is a state of inactivity and metabolic depression in endotherms. And speaking like that is how you end up having fewer friends. Or just wonderful friends, I guess. Wikipedia goes on to say that hibernation refers to a season of heterothermy characterized by low body temperature, slow breathing and heart rate, and low metabolic rate. This is just how an organism monitors or changes its heat signature, inside, outside. Beartrust.org, a nice investment vehicle, no, this is about bears, says, quote, a biological mechanism some animals use to conserve energy and cope with food shortages. During hibernation, stored body fat is used up at a relatively slow rate. Hibernation is characterized by a state of inactivity and low metabolic functioning, low body temperature, and slow breathing. So there seems to be this theme of slow metabolism, low body temperature, slower breathing. Hibernation seems to have been studied a lot in rodents and various animals. For example, Science World says that chipmunks can reduce their heartbeat from 350 beats per minute to a measly 4 beats per minute during hibernation.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Indubitably.
Wow.
350 beats a minute at the moment. Crazy. Further, they say that true hibernators dramatically reduce their heart rate and body temp and wake every few weeks to eat small amounts of stored food and to pass waste. Consequently, true hibernators don't sleep through the entire winter.
Oh.
Aha. I wondered how they manage their metabolic processes, so that was interesting to learn.
Yeah.
But what about bears, Darren? That's what you said this was about.
What about bears?
Exactly. That bears. Well, many bears can sleep for up to 100 days, not waking to eat or pass waste. But many don't consider bears true hibernators. What does this even mean? How to unpack this? So bears do reduce their heart rate, and they do reduce their body temperature, but only by about 8 degrees Celsius. Not as much as other animals who hibernate, and it definitely doesn't match the temperature of the outside world. A lot of these animals are actually lowering their body temp to be about the same as their surrounding environment.
Yeah.
Additionally, bears can wake up quite quickly if threatened, while animals in hibernation will not wake up if they are touched or if there are loud noises. It is more bears are in a deep sleep called torpor. But how can they sleep so long without eating?
Yeah.
Science World says that bears are able to literally turn their pee into protein through a urea recycling process.
Cool.
I believe you can probably buy this on the raw water site. Or goop. The urea produced by their fat metabolism is broken down and the nitrogen is reused by the bear to rebuild protein. These new proteins are used to maintain organ and muscle tissue. This is why bears who aren't hibernating can stay asleep, while those who technically do hibernate cannot.
Dude, don't give Goop any ideas.
I've been taking the approach that bears aren't true hibernators, even though that language makes me bristle a bit, the one true Scotsman fallacy and so on. So for balance, I wanted to mention that Wikipedia says, quote, although traditionally reserved for deep hibernators such as rodents, the term has been redefined to include animals such as bears and is now applied based on active metabolic suppression rather than absolute body temperature decline. Many experts believe that the process of daily torpor and hibernation form a continuum and utilize similar mechanisms. Another research has called bears super hibernators because they can stay asleep and are less vulnerable. So, it turns out bears do hibernate in a way. They can sleep for long periods of time because their organs and muscles don't fully decay because they have a process to maintain growth, but they actually don't drop their temperature that much. Now, I'm curious to know is whether Adam learned anything from this segment.
Yes, because I've forgotten a lot about what I covered on hibernation. I remember mentioning bears don't really hibernate, and it was called something else, and I probably used that word that you used.
Torpor?
I remember the other thing was, why don't rabbits hibernate? It's because they're not rodents. I wonder if the difference may just have to do with the size. The fact that a smaller mammal or a smaller animal can essentially burrow somewhere and hibernate for an extended period in their own hole, whereas a bear's pretty big, so it's kind of hard to hide. So the bear needs to be able to get out of it, right?
A den or the cave or something like that.
Yeah.
Survival advantage, evolutionary adaptation.
And I wonder how vampires come into this whole thing with their sleeping in the coffins and all that.
Boo. Thanks for listening, everyone. Tonight we talked about ways you can support the show if you can. Christina brought us the sad realization that there's a raw water craze and it's probably not going to stop anytime soon.
Yeah.
And I explored whether bears hibernate, and I would say they do, with a little asterisk explaining what that means. Until next time, think better to act better.
Peace out, Q-Bears.
Stay classy, not smart-assy.
Good night, everyone.
For show notes or to discuss this episode, visit our Facebook page and website at trcpodcast.com. For general inquiries or to send a topic or parody suggestion, email info@trcpodcast.com. Help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes and liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at TRC_podcast.
Bears hibernate. When I was thinking of possible topics to cover...
Sorry. You just went...
Adam, do you need something better than that, Pat?
That's fantastic.
That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
No, I thought that might generate more comments.
Well, since I did the segment, I wasn't going to say more. It turns out Adam used the exact same word as you. That's fantastic.